Tanya van Killenborg, a free-spirited and adventurous young woman, was born on March 7, 1969 in Saanich, British Columbia, Canada. Growing up, she exhibited a rebellious streak, as evidenced by her audacious act of wearing a man's tuxedo to her high school prom, an early glimpse into her independent and unconventional nature. Tanya's passion for exploration and curiosity about the world were evident in her decision to embark on a trip across Europe with her best friend, May Robson, shortly before meeting her eventual boyfriend, Jay Cook. This experience left a lasting impression on her, shaping her desire to continue traveling and avoiding commitments that might tie her down. Despite her inclination toward a nomadic lifestyle, Tanya was not without responsibility. To fund her adventures, she worked part-time as both a dog walker and a waitress at Pickwick's, a British-themed restaurant in Vancouver City. Her decision to skip college and work towards her goal of traveling reflected her determination to chart her own path. Born on December 16, 1966, Jabe Roland Cook hailed from Saanich, British Columbia. By the time 1987 rolled around, Jay, at 20 years old, was grappling with a sense of directionlessness. Uncertain about his future, he faced the pressures of adulthood without a clear vision of his goals. Raised in a family with a strong work ethic installed by his father Gordon, Jay, along with his two sisters, contributed to the family business, Cook and Talbot Limited Heating Specialists, a small family-run company specializing in furnace installations. Although Jay was contemplating a shift toward marine biology, he engaged in the family business to occupy his time. Jay's reputation as a responsible and reliable individual stretched back to his high school days. At social gatherings, he demonstrated his caring nature by intervening when a friend faced potential harm due to excessive drinking. He once abandoned his job at a pizza parlor to cycle through rain for 3 hours to join friends, showcasing his spontaneous and lively side. Jay's life took a significant turn when he met Tanya through a mutual friend in July of the same year. Tanya was drawn to Jay's caring and responsible demeanor, and their relationship quickly blossomed. Despite uncertainties about his own future, Jay's willingness to take on challenges and his dynamic personality endeared him to those around him. Though relatively short-lived, was marked by a sense of adventure. Tanya's initial hesitance towards settling down was juxtaposed with Jay's eagerness to carve out a future together. Their decision to embark on a work-related trip to Seattle reflected not only their commitment to each other, but also their shared enthusiasm for new experiences. Unfortunately, this trip would take a dark turn that would cost both Tanya and Jay their lives. The plan involved a scenic route starting with a ferry from Victoria to Port Angeles, Washington, followed by a drive through various highways to eventually reach Seattle. Initially, Tanya tried to invite her best friend May to join them on the trip, but May had to decline due to illness. Reflecting later, May could not shake off the guilt, wondering if her presence might have altered the tragic events that unfolded. The young couple embarked on their journey on November 18, 1987, in Jay's father's 1977 Ford Club van. The purpose of the trip was for Jay to pick up the furnace from a supplier in Seattle. The first leg of their journey seemed uneventful. However, the last confirmed sighting of Jay and Tanya was at a ferry terminal in Bremerton at 10:16 p.m., where they purchased a ticket to Seattle. The following morning, when the supplier waited in vain for them to collect the furnace, concerns set in. Reported them missing on November 20th. Despite mounting worry, law enforcement hesitated to open a full-scale investigation, citing the lack of evidence of foul play. As the families anxiously waited, Bill Van Coilenborg, a lawyer, took matters into his own hands. Frustrated by the lack of progress, he organized a helicopter search. But the vastness of Washington state thwarted his efforts. On November 24th, a devastating discovery was made when Tanya's half-naked body was found in a ditch near Parson Creek Road in Skagit County. She had been assaulted and bound with plastic ties and an execution-style shot in the head. Tanya's father, Bill Van Coilenborg, was called in to identify his daughter. Following the gruesome discovery of Tanya Van Coilenborg's lifeless body near Parson Creek Road, investigators uncovered several crucial pieces of evidence that further deepened the mystery and horror surrounding the case. A bartender at Essie's Tavern in Bellingham reported finding Tanya's wallet and a set of keys behind the bar. Initially considered lost property, the bartender's realization prompted by news of Tanya's case led to him contacting the police. The wallet's contents were identified as belonging to Tanya, sparking a closer examination of the area. As investigators delved into the surroundings, additional clues began to surface, linking the crime scene to the one at Essie's Tavern. This detail suggested a potential connection between the location where her belongings were found and her slaying. The investigation took a pivotal turn when the team located a van matching the description given by Bill Van Coilenborg. Jay Cook had been driving this van, and it was found in proximity to Tanya's body. The inside of the van revealed a grim reality. It was covered in blood belonging to both Tanya and Jay. The state of the van coupled with the blood evidence raised immediate concerns about Jay's well-being. Initially considered a potential suspect due to his unknown whereabouts, Jay Cook was now viewed as another victim. The evidence strongly suggested that he too had met a tragic end, dispelling earlier suspicions that he was involved and perhaps responsible for what had happened to Tanya. On November 26th, a man named Scott Walker stumbled upon Jay Cook's lifeless body during a hunting if Tanya's crime scene had been gruesome. Jay's discovery was arguably even more chilling. The scene was grim, with dog collars and twine tightly wound around Jay's neck. Disturbingly, tissues and a pack of cigarettes had been shoved down his throat, causing asphyxiation. Severe head wounds and blood stains on his clothes suggested he had been subjected to brutal violence, possibly even torture. The timeline of events surrounding Jay's end became a critical aspect of the investigation. Given that the couple's van was found closer to Tanya's body than to Jay's, it was reasoned that Jay's life might have been taken first. The disturbing implication was that the perpetrator might have eliminated Jay to facilitate the assault on Tanya without any hindrance. The grisly details of Jay's demise painted a horrifying picture, leaving investigators grappling with the enormity of the crimes committed against the young couple. As law enforcement worked tirelessly to piece together the sequence of events, the haunting question of who was responsible for such brutal acts loomed large. While Jay's discovery provided some closure to his family, it intensified the urgency of solving the case. With both victims now confirmed to not be alive anymore, the focus shifted to unraveling the identity of the perpetrator responsible. In the aftermath of the brutal slayings of Tanya Van Coilenborg and Jay Cook, their families faced a new wave of torment in December 1987. An anonymous letter writer claiming to be the man responsible sent threatening letters to both families. As investigators delved into the letters, the anonymous writer was eventually eliminated as a suspect, leaving the families with more questions than answers. Detective Jim Scharf, deeply affected by the heinous nature of the unsolved case, played a pivotal role in seeking justice. In 1995, he helped form a cold case team, and the case of Tanya and Jay became one of their earliest assignments. The quest for answers took a significant turn in May 2003, when investigators examined the van belonging to the victims. Among the critical pieces of evidence found were Tanya's black pants, on which male DNA was discovered. The DNA did not match Jay Cook. This unidentified DNA labeled individual A became a crucial focus for investigators. Despite uploading the profile to CODIS, the FBI's National Offender Database in 2003, there were no hits, leaving the case in a frustrating standstill. Over the years, Detective Sharp faced numerous theories and false leads, with over 200 names crossing his desk. In 2015, a woman named Chelsea Rustard, who was unrelated to the victims, uploaded her DNA to a public database to explore her family tree. Little did she know that her DNA would become a crucial piece in unlocking the mystery of what had happened to Tanya and Jay. The breakthrough finally came on April 25, 2018. Inspired by the Golden State Offender's arrest, Detective Scharf, eager to leverage the same technology, collaborated with Parabon Nanolabs and genetic genealogist C.C. Moore. Individual A's DNA was uploaded to GED Match, and within hours, Moore identified second cousins, enabling her to construct a detailed family tree. The name that came up was William Earl Talbot II. To confirm the match, investigators trailed Talbot, a trucker, until they were able to retrieve a discarded paper coffee cup. Forensic scientist Lisa Collins subsequently confirmed the match between the DNA on Talbot's cup and individual A. On May 17, 2018, after over 3 decades of searching for answers, William Earl Talbot II was arrested. The families of Tanya Van Coilenborg and Jay Cook, who had endured years of uncertainty, were notified of this significant development. For Detective Scharf, it was a momentous occasion, bringing a sense of closure and justice to one of the most perplexing unsolved cases he had encountered. In June 2019, William Earl Talbot II was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without and Jay Cook. However, on December 7, 2021, an appellate court overturned the conviction due to juror bias. This decision led to the possibility of a second trial. On December 22, 2022, the appellate court rejected the notion of a retrial, reinstating the guilty verdict. The court emphasized the defense's choice not to use peremptory challenges to dismiss the juror in question. As of December 22, 2022, Talbot remains in custody. J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett, 2 vivacious 17-year-olds from Dothan, Alabama, shared a profound friendship and promising aspirations that were tragically cut short on the fateful summer night of July 31, 1999. Born J.B. Hilton Green Beasley in the summer of 1982, J.B.'s name was a composite of her father, Hilton Lanier Beasley, and his friend, J.B. Green. In her early years, J.B. was characterized as a lively and rambunctious child, unafraid to engage and interact with those around her. As J.B. entered adolescence, she transformed into a beautiful and intelligent young woman. Popular at Northview High School in Dothan, she was not only a gifted dancer with aspirations of securing a dance scholarship for college, but also harbored dreams of becoming a pediatrician. Despite facing challenges, including a temporary falling out with her mother and a custody dispute, J.B. navigated her teenage years with resilience. Was the oldest child in her family. Known for her caring nature, Tracy earned the nickname D for often serving as the designated driver for her friends. Academically exceptional, she was a majorette at Northview High School, consistently making the presidential honor roll. Since the age of 3, Tracy harbored a steadfast dream of becoming a doctor, and she and a friend had already applied to Florida State University. Both young women shared a close bond that extended beyond their school activities. J.B. invited Tracy to a birthday party planned in her honor on the last Saturday before the start of her senior year. The tragic events of that night began when the girls, navigating in J.B.'s Mazda 929, got lost on the way to the party in Headland. Seeking directions in Ozark marked the beginning of an inexplicable and devastating series of events. The night of July 31, 1999 was an evening intended for a celebration, as the 2 teenagers in honor of J.B.'s upcoming birthday. Their journey began at 10:05 p.m., as J.B. and Tracy embarked on the route to the neighboring town. Navigating the curvy backroads, they found themselves lost, ultimately ending up in Ozark, 20 miles north of Dothan. At 11:30 p.m., they stopped at a closed Big Little store in Ozark seeking direction. A woman and her daughter provided guidance, and Tracy used the payphone to inform her parents of their situation, expressing confidence that they would be home soon. Sadly, that call would be the last communication from the 2 girls. Tracy's mother, Carol Roberts, fell asleep, only to awaken at 4:45 a.m. to find no sign of the girls. Discovered crammed unceremoniously into the trunk of a car. The lifeless bodies of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett bore witness to the brutality of their execution-style slayings, each felled by a single 9mm gunshot to the head. Police ruled out robbery as a motive, given the untouched belongings in the car. The missing car keys bearing the distinctive block-lettered keychain spelling hard to get became a significant puzzle piece. The investigation that ensued was marked by intensity and thoroughness, with law enforcement initially grappling with scant leads. The girls, fully clothed and covered in mud, displayed no clear signs of struggle, adding to the mystery surrounding their demise. Weeks later, a pivotal breakthrough emerged when the state lab revealed traces of male DNA on J.B.'s bra, underwear, and skin, a crucial piece of DNA evidence that would later become the linchpin in solving the case. Despite initial leads leading nowhere, A twist occurred a month after the crime was committed. A man named Johnny Barentine came forward with a confession and claimed to have witnessed a black truck speeding away from the crime scene. Barentine lived in close proximity to where the bodies were found, and inconsistencies arose, casting doubt on his confession. A neighbor he implicated had an alibi, and the male DNA found at the crime scene did not match. Barentine soon found himself arrested as the prime suspect. He would later tell a grand jury that he fabricated the entire thing to get the reward money. The case stagnated for 2 decades with various speculations circulating about the perpetrators. In 2018, spurred by the success in capturing the Golden State offender, investigators renewed their efforts. The evidence was submitted to Parabon Nanolabs, leading to the development of a genetic profile and a groundbreaking identification. Ozark Chief of Police Marlos Walker found himself in a pivotal moment when he decided to submit the collected evidence from the crime scene of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett to Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based forensic technology company. The objective was clear: find the suspect responsible for the case that had haunted the community since July 31, 1999. Utilizing advanced genetic analysis, Parabon Nanolabs developed a comprehensive genetic profile and employed the public DNA database GEDmatch to trace family connections leading to a potential suspect. Months later, the breakthrough came. A match was found. The name attached to the DNA profile was none other than 45-year-old Coley McCraney, a revelation that added a layer of complexity to the case. Strikingly, Police Chief Marlos Walker, a former classmate with whom he had shared the basketball court. On March 17, 2019, the culmination of the investigation led to McCraney's arrest during a routine traffic stop. The shocking twist lay in the fact that for all appearances, McCraney had led a quiet and unassuming life. A truck driver with a brief military stint and a role as a bishop in a local church, he seemed worlds away from the heinous crimes with which he was charged. The anticipated trial faced its own set of challenges. Originally scheduled for September 2020, the onset of the global pandemic forced a delay. The ensuing months brought additional heartache for the families, as the trial scheduled for August 2022 was hindered by a lack of suitable jurors. The setback intensified the emotional burden carried by those seeking justice for JB and Tracy. Finally, on April 17, 2023, at the Dale County Courthouse, the trial commenced. The courtroom witnessed a procession of forensic scientists offering crucial testimony. Among the damning evidence was a revelation from a forensic scientist who confirmed the presence of McCraney's DNA in Beasley's body that was collected in 1999, leaving no room for doubt regarding the perpetrator's guilt. McCraney, who had steadfastly maintained his innocence since his arrest, underwent a surprising transformation during the trial. In a turn of events, he presented a different version of the night's events. He testified that he and J.B. Beasley had arranged to meet at an Ozark gas station at 10 p.m. on July 31, 1999, a claim that contradicted the prosecution's narrative. According to McCraney, Beasley failed to appear at the designated meeting spot, leading him to encounter her and Tracy Hallett later that night when they were lost. Offering assistance, he proposed to guide them back to Highway 231, leading to an unexpected scenario. McCraney's testimony described consensual intercourse between him and Beasley inside his long-haul truck while Tracy remained in the car. This account sharply contrasted with the state's theory alleging that McCraney had threatened the girls with a 9mm handgun, leading them into a marshy area where he allegedly assaulted Beasley before executing both girls and concealing their bodies in the car trunk. Despite the conflicting narratives, the jury, after brief deliberation, reached a verdict on April 26, 2023. Coley McCraney was found guilty of all the charges against him. The swift decision led to a life sentence without the possibility of parole. As McCraney heard his fate, he was placed in handcuffs and escorted out of the courtroom, closing a chapter in the prolonged saga of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett's tragic demises. In the vibrant community of College Station, Texas, Virginia Ginger Freeman, a 40-year-old wife, mother, and dedicated real estate agent, was known for her energetic personality and strong ties to her community. However, the tranquility of this tight-knit town was shattered on December 1, 1981, when Virginia's life took a tragic turn. Virginia's usual routine of showing a vacant Brazos County residence to a potential buyer ended in a horrifying discovery for her husband, Charles Freeman. Concerned when Virginia failed to return home from work, Charles found her lifeless body in the vacant property. The scene was marked by extreme violence, with signs of head trauma and stabbing to the neck. It was a crime that investigators would later describe as an act using excessive force, emphasizing the brutality inflicted upon this unsuspecting woman. The investigation commenced with Charles Freeman as a primary focus, a routine step in such cases. However, thorough examination ruled out any indications of trouble within the marriage, and Charles provided a solid alibi, eliminating him as a suspect. Early leads emerged when a local brick mason reported seeing a man and a vehicle near the crime scene, prompting forensic hypnosis to generate a composite sketch and a partial license plate. Unfortunately, this avenue yielded no firm leads. 2 years passed with the case going cold, until a potential connection to another case emerged. Henry Lee Lucas, already convicted of a slaying in Ringgold, Texas, about 250 miles away, shocked the court by claiming responsibility for numerous additional cold cases. Investigators hoping for a breakthrough showed Lucas a picture of Virginia, and he confessed to stabbing her in the neck. When Lucas failed to identify the crime scene, it became evident that this was a false confession, a desperate attempt to delay his fate. The case remained stagnant until 1997, when advances in DNA technology provided a glimmer of hope. DNA found under Virginia's fingernails suggested a struggle, and the Brazos County Sheriff's Department, in collaboration with the Texas Rangers Cold Case Task Force, decided to reopen the investigation. Suspects were tested for DNA, including Charles Freeman, whose DNA did not match the evidence found. Despite initial setbacks, investigators honed in on James Otto Earhart, a former appliance repairman who, 6 years after Virginia's slaying, had been convicted of taking the life of a 9-year-old girl less than 10 miles away. The challenge lay in obtaining Earhart's DNA posthumously, as he had been executed in 1999. Through a meticulous process involving genealogy records and cooperation from Earhart's son, the team obtained permission to exhume his body in June 2018. The shocking state of Earhart's remains, exposed to the elements in a cardboard box, presented a formidable obstacle. Nevertheless, a DNA sample was successfully collected from a femur bone and analyzed. The results conclusively matched the DNA profile from Virginia's fingernail clippings. James Otto Earhart was posthumously identified as the perpetrator, providing closure to a decades-old mystery. While Charles Freeman did not live to witness justice being served, his children found solace in the resolution of their mother's case. The investigators, despite their regret in being unable to apprehend Earhart, celebrated the closure of a case that had haunted the community for nearly 4 decades. The journey from a brutal slaying to posthumous conviction showcased the tenacity of law enforcement and the evolving role of forensic technology in solving cold cases. In the quiet town of Stillwater, Minnesota, Pamela Kajanis was born in 1958 into the warmth of a tight-knit family on a dairy farm. The second youngest of 8 siblings, Pamela grew up surrounded by love and the simple pleasures of farm life. As she matured, Pamela felt a yearning for adventure beyond the boundaries of her familiar surroundings. At the age of 25, fueled by a desire to explore the world and serve her country, she made a life-altering decision to join the United States Navy. Pamela's journey led her from the heart of Minnesota to Central Florida, where she embarked on a new chapter at the Orlando Naval Training Center in May 1984. Her upbringing on the family farm had instilled in her a strong work ethic and a sense of discipline that proved invaluable during the rigorous Navy training. Pamela successfully completed 2 months of training, and on August 3, 1984, she proudly graduated from the Naval Training Center. However, the celebration of her achievement was short-lived. The next day, on August 4, 1984, Pamela's promising future took a tragic turn. She was last seen at the Fashion Square Mall in Orlando, where she purchased makeup and toiletries from a Kmart. A receipt discovered later by investigators bore the timestamp of 3:18 p.m., providing a crucial piece of evidence regarding her last known activities. Later that evening, Pamela was observed walking near the Naval Training Center with an unidentified man between 6:30 and 7 p.m. Their presence at Club Mariner, a bar on the Navy base, was documented. The details surrounding the unidentified man remained a puzzle for investigators, adding complexity to the unfolding tragedy. Pamela Kahena's body was discovered lifeless and partially nude in front of a vacant home on Riverview Avenue in Sanford on August 5, 1984. The brutal nature of her end suggested that her life had been taken elsewhere before being callously discarded. The investigation took a harrowing turn when a generic receipt void of any identifying information was found at the crime scene. This mysterious receipt indicated a purchase at 1:09 a.m. believed to be from a Chinese restaurant. Pamela Kahena's untimely demise shook her family to the core, leaving them grappling with grief and unanswered questions for 34 long years. The initial investigation proved challenging, with authorities struggling to identify a suspect or discern the motive behind the heinous crime. The geographical proximity to the Naval Training Center led investigators to believe that the perpetrator might have had connections to the military base. Despite diligent efforts by the Seminole County Sheriff's Department, crucial leads were elusive, and the case remained unsolved for decades. The passage of time did not diminish the determination of Pamela's family to seek justice for their beloved sister. In their quest for closure, they endured false leads and moments of despair, yet their hope endured. A breakthrough finally came in the form of advancements in forensic technology. In a stunning turn of events, a detective from the Seminole County Sheriff's Department contacted Pamela's family, arranging an in-person meeting in Minnesota. The family, anticipating routine updates on the case, gathered, unaware of the monumental revelation that awaited them. The investigator showed the family a video capturing the arrest of a suspect, Thomas Lewis Garner. The 59-year-old dental hygienist who had worked at the Orlando Naval Training Center concurrently with Pamela Kahena's was taken into custody on a first-degree homicide charge. The arrest unfolded in Jacksonville, where Garner had been residing for several years. The arrest marked the beginning of a new chapter for Pamela Kahena's family, but it also opened a floodgate of questions. The motive behind the crime remained undisclosed, and the circumstances linking Garner and Pamela within the naval training context remained unclear. Garner, having appeared in court, faced the gravity of the charges against him, with the potential for spending the remainder of his life behind bars. The breakthrough in the case was achieved through the innovative use of DNA analysis and genealogy databases. Investigators utilizing the public genealogy database GEDmatch constructed a DNA family tree, leading them to Thomas Lewis Garner. A subsequent surveillance of Garner and the acquisition of a personal item enabled detectives to match his DNA with evidence preserved from the crime scene in 1984. Thomas Garner's arrest in 2019 marked a turning point in the cold investigation and brought a renewed sense of hope to the Kahena's family after enduring decades of uncertainty. During the trial, Thomas Garner took the stand in his own defense. He admitted to the possibility of a casual, intimate encounter with Pamela several years prior, but vehemently denied any involvement in her brutal demise. Garner's defense strategy aimed to cast doubt on the prosecution's case, presenting an alternative narrative that sought to distance him from the crime. In a long-awaited conclusion to the cold case, a jury delivered a verdict of guilt against Thomas Garner. Following the conviction, Garner was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, marking the end of a protracted legal process that spanned nearly 4 decades. Pamela Kahena's sister, representing the family, read an impactful statement in open court immediately after the verdict was announced. She expressed a mix of emotions, emphasizing the hope that Garner would reflect on the time he spent free while her family endured the pain of loss. The sentencing, though providing a sense of closure, could never fully erase the years of suffering the family endured in the absence of justice. Detectives later disclosed that Thomas Garner is under investigation as a potential suspect in another cold case. His DNA reportedly matched evidence found at the scene of a 1982 slaying in Honolulu involving a 25-year-old woman. While Garner has not been formally charged in this case, prosecutors hinted at the possibility that he may have additional victims. Speculation arose that Garner could be a serial offender, prompting further scrutiny into his potential involvement in other unsolved cases. The arrest and conviction of Thomas Lewis Garner in connection with Pamela Kahena's violent case is a testament to the resilience of those seeking justice and the evolving landscape of forensic technology. Pamela's story, which began with a young woman's pursuit of adventure and service, took a tragic turn, leaving an indelible mark on her family. The tragic case is a reminder that, even after the passage of time, dedicated investigators and advancements in forensic science can bring resolution to the most perplexing cold cases. Pamela Kahena's legacy may yet become a symbol of resilience and determination in the face of darkness. Sophie Sergi, born in 1973, hailed from the small and remote village of Pidge's Point in western Alaska, situated on the Yukon River. Pidge's Point, with a population of less than 200 people at the time, was predominantly inhabited by indigenous people, and Sophie belonged to the Yupik tribe. By the unique challenges and beauties of rural Alaska, the village, marked by its isolation and small population, instilled in Sophie a sense of community, family values, and a connection to her indigenous roots. Life in Pidge's Point was likely characterized by the close bond between community members, who shared a common way of life in the remote Alaskan wilderness. Sophie was described as a wonderful daughter and an exemplary individual. Her character was marked by qualities such as brightness, hard work, and a strong determination to pursue her dreams. In the eyes of the community, she became a role model, particularly for the younger generation. Sophie's aspirations reached beyond the boundaries of her small village, and she harbored dreams of achieving more significant accomplishments in her life. Despite the challenges posed by the remote location and limited resources, Sophie's dedication to education shone through. She managed to secure a full scholarship to the University of Alaska, a prestigious opportunity that required her to relocate approximately 500 miles away from her hometown. This move represented a significant transition from the tight-knit, indigenous community to the bustling and culturally diverse environment of the university. Sophie's academic pursuits at the university were centered around marine biology, a field that reflected her fascination with the wonders of the ocean. As Sophie excelled in her studies, she faced a critical juncture in her life that prompted her to take a temporary hiatus from college. The reasons for this decision were twofold. Firstly, Sophie felt a profound sense of responsibility towards her family, especially her aging mother, and wanted to return home to provide care and support. Secondly, she recognized the financial constraints associated with her educational journey, and decided to work and save money for necessary dental surgery. During her time away from the university, Sophie took on the role of a teacher's assistant at a school in her hometown village. This choice exemplified her commitment to contributing to the community and reflected her strong work ethic. Her decision to take control of her financial situation, working towards saving money for her dental surgery rather than burdening her family, underscored Sophie's independence and sense of responsibility. After completing 2 years of marine biology studies, she intended to re-enroll in college, signifying her unwavering commitment to achieving her academic goals. However, the trajectory of Sophie's life took a tragic turn during a weekend trip to Fairbanks in April 1993. April 25, 1993 started as a seemingly ordinary day filled with routine activities. On this day, Sophie had flown into Fairbanks for a dental appointment. Her plans included staying with her friend Shirley, who was enrolled at the University of Alaska Fairbanks and residing in Bartlett Hall, a dormitory. Sophie went out with friends that evening, enjoying a movie and some food, engaging in activities that mirrored the lives of many college students. The last known photograph of Sophie captured her in a moment of happiness, arms spread as if ready to embrace the world during a sunset-watching excursion. Returning to her friend Shirley's room in Bartlett Hall, Sophie spent the night in a casual setting, watching movies and hanging out with Shirley and her boyfriend Noah. As the night progressed, Sophie went down to the common area for a drink and later decided to have a cigarette. Given the freezing Alaskan temperatures, Shirley suggested that Sophie smoke in the second-floor bathroom to avoid the cold. And while she was away, Shirley and Noah decided to leave, leaving a note on the door to inform Sophie. Unbeknownst to them, this decision would inadvertently contribute to the mystery surrounding Sophie's disappearance. The next morning, Shirley, returning to her dorm room, discovered that Sophie had not returned. Shirley reported Sophie missing to the police. Simultaneously, Sophie's family, unaware of the tragedy unfolding in Fairbanks, received a call from Sophie's orthodontist, reporting her absence from the scheduled appointment. As the day unfolded, a janitor cleaning the second-floor bathroom in Bartlett Hall made a horrifying discovery. Sophie Sergi's body was found in the bathtub, having endured a brutal assault that included binding, gagging, tasering, beating, stabbing, and ultimately a gunshot to the back of her head. The crime scene reflected the heinous nature of the act, with Sophie's pants and underwear pulled down, her sweater and bra pushed up, and her body damp from the running water. The discovery sent shockwaves through the University of Alaska Fairbanks community, prompting an urgent investigation by local authorities. Sophie's brutal slaying, committed in a college dormitory, struck a chord of fear and disbelief, leading to heightened security measures and emotional support services for students. Immediately following the discovery of Sophie's body on April 26, 1993, local police, forensic experts, and detectives descended upon the dormitory to meticulously examine and document every inch of the crime scene. The severity and brutality of the crime demanded a thorough and exhaustive investigation to bring the perpetrator to justice. Authorities collected evidence painstakingly, combing the bathroom tile by tile, securing fingerprints, hair samples, and any potential DNA from the scene. Despite the limitations of forensic technology in 1993, investigators recognized the importance of preserving these samples for future advancements in DNA analysis. Sophie's autopsy revealed no illegal substances or alcohol in her system, further emphasizing the gravity of the crime committed against her. Eyewitness testimonies played a crucial role in piecing together the events leading up to Sophie's end. Two students, Vanessa Allen and Jennifer Roy, would later provide valuable information. Vanessa, who lived in the dormitory during the semester, described feeling uneasy on the night of April 25 as she entered the rarely used East Side bathroom, an unusual occurrence that raised her suspicions. Vanessa heard disturbing noises, likened to firecrackers emanating from the adjacent room. Similarly, Jennifer Roy, a graduating senior, was up late studying on the west side of the dormitory. She heard distinct noises through the shared wall with the other bathroom around 1:30 a.m. on Monday. Jennifer perceived an unidentifiable rustling sound, a loud thud against the wall, and murmuring, speculating that it might involve a male and a female. The culmination of witness testimonies, forensic evidence, and the gruesome details of Sophie's assault prompted an intensified effort to identify and apprehend the perpetrator. The investigation faced challenges due to the transient nature of college campuses, with students leaving for the semester and some never returning. Tracking down individuals for questioning proved difficult, as room assignments often changed and the dormitory roster did not always reflect accurate residency. As investigators conducted interviews and pursued leads, they aimed to reconstruct the timeline of events on the night of the attack, narrowing down the window between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. when Sophie's life was taken. As the years passed, the Sophie Sergi case became a cold case, one that investigators revisited periodically. With the evolution of forensic techniques, especially in DNA analysis, authorities seized the opportunity to reevaluate the evidence. The focus shifted to unlocking the potential of the preserved DNA samples, hoping to identify the person responsible for Sophie's heinous slaying. The breakthrough came in 2018 with advancements in DNA testing capabilities. The preserved samples were subjected to modern DNA analysis, allowing investigators to create a genetic profile of the suspect. This profile could then be compared to DNA databases, increasing the chances of finding a match. The relentless pursuit of justice and the commitment to leveraging emerging forensic technologies were crucial in bringing closure to Sophie's case. Genealogical DNA analysis, a technique that gained prominence in solving cold cases, played a pivotal role. This method involves comparing crime scene DNA with publicly available genetic databases, potentially leading to the identification of familial connections. Genealogical DNA analysis has been instrumental in unmasking suspects in cases that have remained unresolved for decades. The investigation reached a turning point when Stephen Downs, a man residing in Maine, became a prime suspect. Further investigation revealed that, at the time of the violent attack, Downs was attending UAF and residing in the dorm where Sophie's life was taken. Downs, who had denied any connection with Sergi during his 2019 interview, was arrested when his DNA definitively matched the sample collected decades ago on Sergi's body. He was extradited from Maine, where he worked as a nurse. During the trial, prosecutors gathered evidence linking Downs to the crime scene, presenting a compelling case against him. Witnesses such as Vanessa Allen and Jennifer Roy provided crucial testimony, recounting their experiences on the night of the attack and contributing valuable insights into the events that transpired. The trial focused on reconstructing the events leading up to Sophie's untimely demise, relying on the memories of those who were present in Bartlett Hall during that fateful night. Testimony of witnesses combined with advancements in forensic technology served as a powerful force in the pursuit of justice for Sophie Sergi and her grieving family. In the end, the trial concluded and Stephen Downs was sentenced to 75 years in prison for the assault, as well as taking the life of Sophie Sergi. The devastating impact of Sophie's tragic demise lingers even after justice has been served. While closure for her friends and family came after almost 30 years, their lives remained forever altered by the tragic events from 1993. The journey from an unsolved cold case to the arrest and conviction of Stephen H. Downs showcases the transformative role of genetic genealogy in bringing justice to victims and closure to grieving families. Jody Loomis, born on June 5, 1952 in Salt Lake City, Utah, was a vibrant and compassionate individual within her family dynamic. As the middle child positioned between her elder brother John and a younger sister, Jody's upbringing was characterized by love and shared experiences. Standing at a modest 5 foot 2 inches, she defied physical expectations with a robust personality, striking blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that reflected the beauty of her compassionate soul. Her love for animals and the outdoors further defined her vibrant spirit. In a character-defining moment, Jody confronted hunters callously shooting pigeons, displaying an unyielding adherence to her principles. Her act of kindness nursing a wounded pigeon back to health showcased a tender side that contrasted with the tragedy that would ultimately take her life. The evening of August 23, 1972 marked an ordinary bike ride for Jody. Headed to visit her horse at a stable 6 miles from her family home in Snohomish County. Around 5:30 p.m., a couple stumbled upon her fighting for her life along a secluded dirt track. The discovery revealed a horrifying scene. Jody, partially nude and critically wounded from a gunshot to the head, rushed to the hospital by the couple who found her. Jody tragically succumbed to her injuries upon arrival. An autopsy later confirmed the additional horror that she had been assaulted, casting an even darker shadow over the tragedy and the serene town of Bothell. In the aftermath of Jody's case, investigators faced the daunting task of unraveling a crime that would haunt the community for decades. Customary approach involved scrutinizing those closest to the victim. Initial suspicions fell on Jody's fiancé, Jim, who had been living at the Loomis home just before the tragedy. However, alibis quickly exonerated him, placing him at work in the hospital during the unfolding tragedy. The focus then shifted to the Rice family, particularly Ken and his son Alan, who were chopping wood near the crime scene. Despite initial suspicions, the family's proximity did not yield conclusive evidence. Frustration mounted as the investigation stalled for nearly 2 years until a tip injected hope. Information surfaced about a group associated with the Reaper's Roadmen biker gang, allegedly boasting about assaulting and taking the life of a young woman. The lead tied back to a .22 caliber pistol, the same caliber as the weapon. However, an FBI ballistics test debunked the connection, leading investigators grappling with the mystery. Fear enveloped the community as young women continued to vanish, prompting concerns of a serial offender. The emergence of this man as a prime suspect intensified the unease. During the initial stages of the investigation, as fear gripped Snohomish County due to a series of disappearances of young women, he emerged as a notorious figure in the region's criminal landscape. He operated in the Pacific Northwest during the same time frame as Jody Slang, raising concerns about his potential involvement. The geographical proximity of his criminal activities to Snohomish County triggered fears of connection. While the age and physical characteristics of Jody bore some resemblance to his known victims, the specifics of her case did not align perfectly with his known methods. The fear of a serial offender operating in the area prompted investigators to explore potential links, despite inconsistencies. Decades later, despite the initial focus on this man, investigators concluded that the details of Jody's violent end did not align with his established modus operandi. The absence of concrete evidence linking him to the crime led to a shift in focus, but the case sadly went cold. In a renewed effort to find justice for Jody, the Cold Case Unit from Snohomish County reignited its investigation, leveraging advancements in DNA technology. However, crucial pieces of evidence, including swabs, the victim's underwear, and the bullet, had mysteriously gone missing over the years, presenting a formidable challenge in reconstructing the narrative. A glimmer of hope emerged from an unexpected source. Left boot that Jody had been wearing at the time of her slaying. In a twist of fate, this seemingly inconspicuous item revealed the presence of male DNA. In 2008, the crime laboratory successfully developed a DNA profile from this crucial piece of evidence, breathing new life into the stagnant investigation. The profile was entered into CODIS, the National DNA Database, but no matches were found at the time. Around a decade later, in July 2018, a breakthrough arrived in the form of forensic genealogy. The DNA profile from the sample on the boot was submitted to Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based company specializing in DNA matching. Through a meticulous comparison with a public genealogy database, investigators honed in on potential suspects by identifying matches with family members. The investigation eventually narrowed down to the Miller family, with Terrence Miller emerging as the prime suspect. Terrence Miller, a retired heavy equipment operator residing just miles away from his troubled past, marked by convictions for lewd conduct in 1968 and assaulting a preteen girl in the 1970s, painted a grim picture. Allegations of abuse against children further intensified the gravity of the accusations. In a meticulously planned operation, undercover police officers discreetly followed Terrence. He left outside a local casino. The DNA profile derived from the cup yielded a chilling revelation. It was an exact match to the male DNA found on Jody's boot. Arrested in April 2019, Terrence Miller, now 78 years old, faced charges related to the assault and demise of Jody Loomis. Despite pleading not guilty to the charges, he faced a trial in late 2020. The courtroom witnessed 2 weeks of intense testimonies and evidence presentations. Tragedy struck one final time on November 9, 2020, just before the jury could deliver a verdict. Terrence Miller took his own life at his home, leaving behind unanswered questions and a community grappling with the abrupt end to a long-awaited trial. Unaware of Terrence's passing, the jury later found him guilty of the charges against him. The irony of the posthumous verdict echoed through the courtroom, symbolizing a form of justice, albeit a bittersweet one. In December 2020, attempts to vacate the guilty verdict failed, closing a chapter that spanned nearly 5 decades. The case of Jody Loomis, with its twists and turns, serves as a sobering reminder of the enduring impact of violent crimes on communities and the tireless efforts of law enforcement to seek justice, even after the passage of many years. While the resolution of the case brought closure to some extent, the scars left by the tragic events of August 23, 1972 will forever linger in the collective memory of Bothell. Washington, located in the small town of Samford in the state of Maine, Emerson School had seen many good years. Over 100 years old, Emerson School was scheduled to be replaced after seeing its run of students. Generations passed through its system and moved on. In 2017, the school property was sold to be replaced with a gas station and convenience store belonging to the Cumberland Farms chain. Children had run happily in the playground, played football, maybe even baseball, not knowing what lay deep beneath the soil, sleeping undisturbed. On May 4, 2017, construction workers were digging for a water line for the gas station when they unearthed a collapsed casket. On further digging, They found human remains and were surprised because the site had been near a school property for years. Who could bury someone so close to the school? Authorities recovered finger bones, a jawbone, teeth, and ribs. As the pelvic bone was missing, it was hard to know whether the remains were male or female. But medical examiners speculated it to be a 10-year-old female child. Officers also found the crumbling pieces of a beautiful antique wooden casket, along with several nickel-plated handles and the coffin's keys. Major Matt Gagney from the Sanford Police Department treated the area as a potential crime scene. But it was later confirmed to be an old gravesite. This was not the first time the people of Sanford came across old bones. In the 1980s, while digging for an elevator shaft of the town hall, they found a leg bone which turned out to be very old. Experts revealed the casket dates back to the Victorian era, which meant this body was over 100 years old. Upon discovering something so unique and mysterious, the construction of the gas station was halted. Then came the meticulous task of carefully excavating the grave. The city manager at the time, Stephen Buck, was accompanied by the construction workers' foreman, Peter Smith, as he sifted through the dirt carefully by hand. They were also joined by Paul Auger, who was a teacher as well as a local historian, a member of the Sanford Springvale Historical Society's board of directors. Auger was an enthusiast, and as soon as the coffin was discovered, he declared the site to be an historical excavation. The mayor at the time allowed them an extension to properly dig out all the invaluable pieces of evidence. His son, Andrew Auger, helped recover all the pieces carefully without damaging anything, as time had rendered them fragile. Everything was documented as a painstakingly removed shards of glass, pieces of metal, and bones covered with dirt and mud. The top of the coffin had a single pane glass window, which was quite common in the Victorian era. According to the Sanford Springvale Historical Society, the roots of a nearby oak tree framed the coffin as if out of a fairy tale. The roots' hairs grown into the casket and remains. They labeled each bone, each artifact, such as the 2 coffin keys and a piece of gingham cloth. A gingham cloth is a sort of plaid check cloth, probably once belonging to a dress. Before reburying the remnants of the coffin, officials felt it was only appropriate to identify the person who was laid to rest there. Some of the proceeds from the sale of Emerson School were used to finance the DNA tests that would be conducted in an attempt to give a name to the deceased. Paul Auger was a high school history teacher, and his students volunteered to help with the identification process. With more hands on deck, the process did not get any easier. The state medical examiner's office had no use for identifying the remains, but Paul Auger championed the cause. Mayor Tom Coate prioritized the digging in the local city council's agenda, and the council approved funding. Later on, Mayor Becky Brink would continue to support the cause. The excavation process was lengthy. Paul and his son Andrew looked for more bones with a special sifter that the owner of a nearby Shores hardware store customized for this purpose. They were able to find parts of a skull, pieces of vertebrae, ribs, and a mandible with teeth. Teeth typically help identify victims easily, but back then there were no dental records. Still, it is good for DNA evidence. Dirt and root hairs that covered the bones were cleaned with soft bristled toothbrushes and chopsticks and washed gently with water. After the cleaning, the human remains were laid out on an examination table at the Carl Heald and Black Funeral Home. By this point, it became public knowledge that the school grounds had previously been Woodlawn Cemetery, as could be seen in photos, maps, and documents from 1889. The land with a new Cumberland farm store was under construction, had been purchased prior to 1889 by Thomas Goodall. Thomas Goodall was the founder of Goodall Mills in the 1860s, who owned the Goodall Mansion across the street. Emerson School, formerly Sanford's high school, was constructed adjacent to the cemetery. The town began relocating graves out of the cemetery around 1900 to make space for the Emerson School, which was built in 1901 and opened to students in 1902. When Willard School was erected in the 1920s, it transitioned to become a high school, while Emerson assumed the role of an elementary school. Sometime in the early 1900s, due to neglect and changing climate, the graves were deteriorating, so they were relocated to Oakdale Cemetery, creating space for a playground at Emerson School. 77 bodies were exhumed on record and reburied at Oakdale. The site was clear enough by 1933 for Emerson School to purchase the grounds. The front page from Sanford Tribune and Advocate newspaper of September 17, 1971, ran a headline that read 300 Emerson School children cheer. As Woodlawn Cemetery is converted into playground by town officials. Paul Auger could recall stories of kids bragging about how they used gravestones as third base for baseball. Except they were not just stories. While the remains were laid out at Carl Heald and Black Funeral Home, they could only deduce they were the bones of a little girl. But it took 6 long years to identify the Woodlawn Cemetery doe, as she was dubbed. Initial DNA tests only confirmed the medical examiner's observation. The bones belonged to a woman, but not a little girl as they had initially assumed. The teeth of the deceased would hopefully provide enough DNA signatures to identify the family this person belonged to. Major Gagne helped upload a genetic profile to the public database known back then as GeneMatch. Years passed, and finally Paul Auger contacted the DNA Doe Project in the spring of 2022. The DNA Doe Project helped identify nameless bodies in an attempt to lay the deceased to rest with consent from their loved ones, possibly solving mysteries or reuniting relatives with the bodies of their own kin. Jennifer Randolph of the DNA Doe Project became actively involved in the search for the missing link. This speeded up the entire process. They handed the DNA samples to Parabon Nanolabs. Parabon Nanolabs in Virginia had recently started a forensic genealogy wing which was relatively new at the time. There were many matches, but most of them were inconclusive. Finally, through bioinformatics, the lab's investigative genetic genealogists were able to identify the nameless body by building a family tree from her great-great-niece and nephew. There were 3 promising leads: a paternal half-great-great-niece, a paternal half-great-great-nephew, and a maternal third cousin 3 times removed. Linking together their family and putting up a family tree, the DNA Doe Project was able to trace the daughters of Ferdinand and Lois Patton. The real puzzle piece that helped figure it all out was the obituary of one Edith Patton 1891, and that is when it all fell into place. Ferdinand and Lois Patton were residents of Fairfield in Somerset County in the state of Maine, as recorded by an 1870 census. It listed down 2 of their daughters, 3-year-old Edith and 2-month-old Elfrida, born in 1867. Edith spent her toddler years in Fairfield. By 1872, her brother Lendell was born as well. In the 1880 census, 13-year-old Edith was employed as a live-in housekeeper in Lewiston, while her father worked at a sawmill. Court records revealed that Lois and Ferdinand Patton divorced after an accusation of adultery in October of 1880. Ferdinand Patton got married again twice. His second wife was Emma Dinsmore, whom he married in October of 1880. Possibly right after his divorce, she passed away soon after their marriage, leading to a third marriage. He married his third wife in 1884, Agnes Avery, who bore him 3 sons. The couple had a daughter in 1899 in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Ferdinand named his daughter Edith May, which was possibly a tribute to the elder sister Edith. Neither Edith nor her full siblings ever married or had children. Her little brother Landell Patton passed away in 1890, and her sister Elfrida in 1917. A bit of her daily journal reported Edith's passing. The cause of her ultimate demise was consumption tuberculosis, which was an epidemic in the 1800s, fatal for 1 in 7 people in the U.S. In 1891, Edith was only 24 years old when she lost her life. To quote the article, "She was beloved by a wide circle of friends who sincerely mourn her untimely passing. She was loved enough to be laid to rest in a glass window coffin with nickel-plated handles dressed in her best." Passing at a young age, Edith Patton did not have many papers to record her life. There is no record of when she moved to Springvale. Her parents also passed away within a few years of Edith losing her life. Nevertheless, Paul Auger deduced she could have been working at a shoe shop as women commonly did at the time. Many graves in Woodlawn Cemetery had no gravestone or marker to identify the deceased. Many were in ruins because of the weather and time. Thanks to advancements in technology. 132 years after being left behind, Edith was now discovered, named, and laid to rest properly. She was identified on March 1, 2023 by the DNA Doe Project. Her identity was announced in a press conference held by the DNA Doe Project. Jennifer Randolph of the DNA Doe Project observed that there had been a larger turnout at the Samford press conference than at a 2021 press conference that identified a victim of Chicago serial offender John Wayne Gacy. Randolph mentioned that Edith's identification was a tribute to how caring people of Samford were. She explained the advanced process that led to identifying Edith. This involved working with DNA in a database, analyzing strong matches, and examining various documents like censuses, newspapers, and diaries. While going through a local person's diary, Randolph found a crucial line. Edith Patton passed away today. This discovery boosted the investigation. All Augur found the confirming obituary at the MacArthur Library in Biddeford. The notice from November 25, 1891, in the Biddeford Journal mentioned Edith's friends but omitted family details. According to Augur, none of Edith's family members are buried in Samford. They are all laid to rest in the same cemetery in Auburn, Maine. The city announced Edith was to be buried with the rest of her family at Oak Hill Cemetery in Auburn, with a marker to bear her name. And so, 132 years after she had been laid to rest, Edith Patton was to be reunited with her family, all thanks to advances in DNA technology. The town of Samford solved the biggest mystery to hit them. Christina Renee King was nicknamed Cricket by her family because she was a small woman. Born in 1972, she was a resident of Kansas City, Kansas. Christina was married to Christopher Wayne Goodall, a roofer by profession. He was a loving husband. In 1988, the couple welcomed their first child, whom they named April. She was followed by a baby sister, Ashley. Christopher's job could not sustain the family, so Christine decided that she would look for ways to provide. According to sources, she started soliciting clients for money in an area called Central Street, offering escort services. At some point, Christopher went to prison, and Christina seemed to lose hope. Despite her societal label, the consensus among those who knew her was that she was in fact a good person. Yet circumstances had led her to a life on the streets, where she navigated the harsh realities of a world that often overlooked the humanity behind the labels. Christina was jailed briefly, but her recent release from prison marked a somber twist in her story. The day following her release proved to be her last. In 1998, April was in 5th grade, celebrating her 10th Christmas when the family received tragic news. December 25th, Christmas morning. Some boys were scavenging for metal in an attempt to sell off any scrap pieces to the junkyard to make a quick buck. They were looking for salvageable pieces in the driveway of an abandoned nursing home. Then, in the cold silence of the winter morning, they came across a partially naked body, beaten, bruised, and discarded like trash. There was blunt force trauma to the head, her pants half pulled down. The victim's bra, shoes, and various other belongings were scattered nearby. In a gruesome tragedy, the victim's face was smashed in. KCPD informed the family and life changed forever. This was the body of 26-year-old Christina King, and a mystery as to who might have taken her life and why ensued. Penny Barnett, Christina's mother, followed up with the KCPD regularly in an attempt to find out whether there was any information. What police failed to convey to Barnett was that they did have a lead: a used condom recovered at the scene of the crime next to Christina's body. In fact, there was quite a bit of neglect and incompetence on their end, but more on that later. Once while on call, Police Detective Terry Mast was so harsh with Penny Barnett that she hung up the phone sobbing. When her husband asked the reason, she told him Detective Mast had been insensitive and called Christina inappropriate names. There was severe prejudice shown against Christina, where at various points, officers told the family that being a streetwalker, as they put it, she was a normal casualty, hinting that she was not exactly a priority. April would later on in life view the autopsy photos of her mother and was shocked to see so many injuries, various abrasions and bruises on her mother's body. In 2010, Christopher Goodall passed away, leaving the two girls orphaned. But their family was already fractured after Christina's demise. They had been living on their own for 5 years when Ashley was only 14 and April was 17. Ashley shared that in the past, she used to walk up and down Quindaro searching for the person responsible for her mother's demise. Quindaro was an abandoned settlement, a ghost town in the 90s. It was unsafe. She found herself in risky situations, desperate for closure. Eventually, Ashley got into a truck with someone she believed had a connection to her mother's slaying. The man was supposedly a suspect because Christina King's cousin and two other women stole a large amount of his illegal substances. But that was just a rumor on the street. He was not the person Ashley was looking for, and thankfully he did not harm her. 2 decades passed and there were no further developments. In December 2021, the family gathered on North 27th Street and Sewell Avenue for a prayer vigil and balloon release. The vigil had been arranged by Justice for Wyandotte, an advocacy group dedicated to fighting for transparency in law enforcement. It helped the loved ones of those wronged by the law itself, and so they agreed to help Christina King's investigation. Khadija Hardaway from the Justice of Wyandotte group organized the entire event. While addressing the people, she emphasized the importance of cases like this, stating that it underscored the necessity for the Kansas Police Department to establish a cold case unit. She requested the new police chief to allocate existing funds for the establishment of a cold case unit. According to Hardaway, this move would enhance transparency in addressing both cold cases and recent investigations. This ignited something in the KCPD that would finally lead to solving Christina's case. The new chief of police, Carl Oakman, would take this request seriously. And right after being sworn in on the 1st of January 2021, he vowed to open up a cold case unit for the force. A year later, true to his word, he managed to establish Kansas City's first cold case, which was operational by January 2022. Employing 3 full-time detectives, it would help solve decades-old cold cases. The reason why Justice for Wyandotte was established in the first place is important to know. It all started with a 43-year-old mother named Pearl Davis. Born in 1953, Pearl Davis was the cousin to Khadija Hardaway and niece to Imam Hanif Khalil, mother to 2 small children, Cordria and Aish Musawar. Pearl was also known as Sammy Mam Musawar. A member of the Kansas City Islamic community, she was a hard worker and provided for her children in any way possible. An expert seamstress, she sewed clothes as a service and ran a transportation business providing rides to Chillicothe Correctional. Additionally, she served as an SRS driver, ran a daycare, sold dinners and bean pies, and actively participated in her family's lives, handling a diverse range of responsibilities. Since Pearl was so actively involved socially, everyone immediately noticed her missing. Unfortunately, on November 22, 1996, Pearl's lifeless body was found in a vacant house on the 700 block of Lafayette Avenue in Kansas City. The house belonged to her late mother. Pearl's autopsy revealed she had been brutally stabbed over 40 times, her clothes stripped away and strewn nearby. The case was in the hands of KCPD Detective Roger Golubsky. Detective Golubsky was accused of various offenses. He misused his position of authority numerous times. From 1983 to 2008, KCPD failed to investigate various women, all similar in age and mostly working women whose lives were taken in a similar fashion. Frequently, these women found themselves struggling with homelessness, substance addiction, or engaged in offering escort services. Their tragic fates often involved brutal methods such as strangulation, other forms of asphyxiation, blunt force trauma, or stabbing. Their lifeless bodies were callously abandoned in remote areas or isolated structures. In a disturbing pattern, all of these women were discovered either partially or fully unclothed, with their pants pulled off or shirts pulled down. Lastly, the articles of clothing worn by the victims were typically found nearby. These harrowing circumstances, with the passage of time while the cases went cold, it became more and more apparent that something was wrong with Golubsky. Although Roger Golubsky was acquainted with most, if not all, of the women who were mercilessly slain, none of the case files reflected his provision of knowledge about these women. Despite the abundance of potential physical evidence available for analysis, most of these particular cases received inadequate forensic attention. This resulted in either limited evidence collection or insufficient efforts to identify potential assailants whose DNA or other forensic results could be compared. The incompetence was remarkable. In fact, in the case of Christina King, the KCPD received a DNA match with a potential suspect, but failed to conduct a follow-up investigation. Khadija Hardway, moved by the prolonged neglect of Golubski's victims' pleas for justice, found inspiration to collaborate with the community in organizing rallies and demonstrations. The faces of the affected women and their stories would not fade into oblivion. Motivated by Pearl's case, she joined forces with like-minded women to establish a nonprofit called Justice for Wyandotte in 2020. The organization worked hard in an attempt to fight against the department's corrupt individuals. Officers were noticed using too much force, bullying, scaring, making up evidence, wrongly arresting people, and making individuals give false testimony to avoid getting falsely accused and imprisoned. Thanks to Justice for Wyandotte highlighting the crimes, they exposed the systematic corruption. They highlighted the case of a falsely accused and imprisoned Lamont McIntyre, who served 23 years for a crime he did not commit. He was arrested on the watch of Roger Golubski. While exonerated in 2017, he never got justice. Golubski roamed free. Still, there was a lot left regarding Golubski, where women were often victimized by him. In the course of her work with the organization, Hardaway initiated a meeting with Carl Oakman, who was a candidate for chief of police back then. During this meeting, she addressed the evident and unacceptable apathy surrounding unsolved cold cases in the community, emphasizing the lasting impact on Kansas City families and loved ones. She strongly advocated for the establishment of a cold case unit within the Kansas City. Following the meeting with Oakman, Justice for Wyandotte launched an awareness campaign and petitioned for the creation of a dedicated cold case unit aiming to address the numerous unsolved cases that had occurred in Kansas City since 1965. Back in 2003, police got a DNA hit on the condom found near Christina's battered body. The suspect was identified, Gary Davis, yet shockingly he was not immediately brought in for questioning. It took 14 months to question Gary Davis, despite his being under intensive supervision by Wyandotte County Community Corrections. 52-year-old Gary Davis was a Kansas City resident, but at the time of the alleged incidents he was a 23 to 25-year-old truck driver. It made sense why back then he would have escaped any type of connections because the nature of his job would send him miles away from the scene of the crime. Police knew his whereabouts at all times, yet it took a whole 20 years to arrest Davis. It was a slow process where everyone seemed to drag their feet. It would take the department 14 months to interrogate the suspect, and then everything went silent for 20 years. Then, after the public appeal of Justice for Wyandotte in 2021, it took another 18 months to process the DNA, assign a team, and subsequently arrest the perpetrator. In 2022, the cold case unit made the connections and it immediately popped up. The DNA from both the crime scenes matched their initial suspect, Gary Davis. Senior officers further found a Facebook page matching the name and description of Davis. The page had various controversial and offensive posts, but most were focused on truck driving and society's double standards regarding men and women. Officers trying to reach him realized out of the 3 listed phone numbers he had, only one was operational, and it was not taking messages because the voicemail box was full. In September 2023, Davis was finally arrested and charged with taking Christina King's life. His bail was set to be $500,000. There was no statute of limitations, which meant the cases could be pursued and he would be charged, tried, and convicted, regardless of how long ago the crime was. If convicted, he would face life in prison. In an unexpected move, Wyandotte County District Attorney Mark Dupre and Kansas City Police Chief Carl Oakman held a news conference praising their investigative work. Dupre claimed the detectives had worked tirelessly, while Oakman downplayed the significance of the DNA hit, emphasizing the need for a thorough investigation. In fact, they minimized the role of a DNA hit, claiming it took effort to analyze and ensure the right suspect was put behind bars. As for Golubski, in March of 2022, attorney Cheryl Pallotti, representing Kansas City, drew attention to the corrupt culture within the KCPD. She filed a statement intending to indict not just disgraced Detective Roger Golubski, but the entire culture in which he thrived. Golubski, in charge of a wrongful arrest, was charged with federal crimes, including kidnapping, intimate assault, and trafficking. Currently, the KCPD is working with other law enforcement agencies to determine whether Davis was responsible for other slayings in the area, Or perhaps since he was a long-haul driver, thousands of miles away. Davis is currently a suspect or person of interest in at least 8 more cases. The cold case unit established thanks to Justice for Wyandotte would go on to solve 11 more cases. It is safe to assume that the KCPD is liable for allowing nearly 30 years to pass before making an arrest that would have been possible years ago. The department owed the victims' families an apology and a good explanation. The traumatized loved ones, especially Christina's daughters, who spent years looking for closure, were all victims of an incompetent department. On a cold December evening in 1955, 16-year-old Patricia, a high school junior, attended her cousin's wedding. That is where she first laid eyes on 18-year-old Airman Lloyd Dwayne Bogle. The instant attraction between them was undeniable. It was like a bolt of lightning. Their connection was deeper than just physical. Within a month of dating, they were talking about marriage. They seemed inseparable, spending a significant amount of time together, going on numerous dates and sharing dreams of a future together. Then, on the night of January 2, 1956, almost a month after they first met, the young couple went on a date to Pete's Drive-In restaurant for a romantic dinner in the Great Falls area in Montana. Witnesses saw them leaving the drive-in around 9 p.m., heading west out of Central Avenue toward a well-known lover's lane close to Wadsworth Park. That was the last anyone saw of them. Neither Patricia nor Dwayne returned home, leaving a mystery in their wake. At precisely 9 p.m., Patricia and Dwayne departed Pete's Drive-In, their final sighting. When Patricia did not arrive home that night, her family concluded she had run away with Dwayne. Familiarity struck her parents. Patricia's oldest sister had similarly eloped at her age, and her parents assumed Patricia had also eloped with Dwayne. The questions swirled in Patricia's parents' minds. Why would she elope? Concern grew as they thought it over. Patricia was not the eloping type. She held an unwavering commitment to her studies, attending high school religiously. College dreams bloomed in her future. Moreover, she valued her curfew, never staying out late. This made her sudden absence even more confounding. And when they thought about Dwayne, he was more than just a passing acquaintance. He was embraced as family by them. He was wholeheartedly accepted in the family. There was no reason for them to elope. Dwayne's stature as a rising sergeant second class at Malmstrom Air Force Base added to the perplexity. Assigned to the 29th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, he held a stable position. Together, the couple seemed to lack motives for running away. That same night, 2 women and 2 airmen crossed paths with a man sprawled between a car and a tree. Untroubled, they brushed it off, assuming the man was too drunk to drive and had collapsed beside his vehicle. A moment overlooked, a life ignored. The next morning, January 3, 1956, 3 young boys exploring the Great Falls area stumbled upon a grim sight. They uncovered the remains of 18-year-old Lloyd Dwayne Bogle. His body lay twisted, partially concealed beneath the car. A chilling discovery etched in the morning light. Dwayne's wrists were bound by his own belt. A fatal wound pierced his skull. His body lay near the car, its ignition still on. Headlights piercing the early morning darkness. A grim scene. Authorities, spurred by a coroner's examination, advised an autopsy. The chilling truth emerged. Dwayne had been shot, yet the bullet remained undiscovered. The search to find the missing bullet continued. It was a very important clue to catch the perpetrator. In a haunting revelation during the autopsy, it emerged that Dwayne was alive for several hours after being shot, adding layers to the tragedy. Patricia was nowhere to be found. The search for Patricia became paramount. A day passed, the 5th of January 1956. Patricia's remains were discovered in a rocky ravine, not too far from Dwayne's. Fully clothed, perched at the edge of a steep embankment off an isolated highway in northwest Montana, 8 miles from Dwayne's. No signs of robbery or assault were noticed in the initial investigation. A puzzling scene, an expensive camera in Dwayne's car, a $5 bill in his wallet. Patricia was not indecently assaulted. Motives questioned, motives unclear. There were no apparent signs suggesting Patricia was forcefully subjected to any forms of inappropriate when her remains were initially examined. However, during her autopsy, it became apparent that she had likely faced a distressing ordeal by an animalistic abuser. The news reports on the incident merely hinted at this, perhaps due to the sensitivity surrounding the matter during that era. Remember, it was the 1950s. Although DNA analysis was unavailable then, examiners carefully stored a swab for a future investigation. Additionally, evidence of multiple injuries implied a vicious struggle between Patricia and her assailant. On that very day, investigators formally questioned a potential suspect. This suspect, an airman who was friends with Duane, had their identity kept confidential. Patricia's mother had sensed Duane's distress a few days earlier, prompting a conversation where he expressed feeling troubled and unable to rid himself of constant grief. He confided about a recent disagreement with a friend. Many believed it was he whom the authorities questioned as a potential suspect. However, this suspect eventually fell out of suspicion. For more than 3 decades, the case remained unsolved without any substantial leads. In November of 1989, investigators made a pivotal decision to search for the bullet, turning their attention to a nearby tree. Cascade County Sheriff Barry Michelotti revealed the tree's significance, as this cottonwood potentially holds the bullet inside it, highlighting the tree's central role in the case. The recovery of this bullet held immense importance, aiming to uncover the weapon's caliber and possibly connect it to firearms seized in other incidents over the years, offering a potential breakthrough in the investigation. Sergeant Dick Duncan knew about the prior unsuccessful attempts to X-ray the tree because of the challenges posed by its immense size and bark density. Towering at approximately 80 feet with a trunk diameter of around 4.5 feet, this tree stood as an obstacle. But this time they had an audacious plan: to shave off approximately 33 growth rings from the lower portion. Anticipating that this action might reveal traces of the bullet's path within the tree, a potential opening or tunnel, a silent witness to the past. Their plan paid off, and the authorities recovered the 33-year-old evidence. Optimism surged when investigators retrieved bullets from the cottonwood tree, reigniting hopes of uncovering the perpetrator. Yet these hopes were quickly dashed as the bullets failed to match with any firearm linked to other criminal activities. Despite the absence of significant breakthroughs, the investigation remained in motion, unwavering in its pursuit of every lead. A staggering 35 individuals were interrogated in connection to the case, showcasing the exhaustive efforts invested in seeking justice. Among the potential suspects in the case stood Edward Wayne Edwards, who had a criminal history dating back to 1956 when he was arrested in Montana for burglary. His criminal escapades intensified when he escaped from Akron Prison in 1955, embarking on a spree of gas station robberies nationwide. By 1961, Edwards had secured a spot on the FBI's most wanted list, an honor he held until his capture in 1962. Following his release on parole in 1967, decades passed before he resurfaced in the legal spotlight. In 2009, he faced arrest once more, subsequently confessing in 2010 to brutally taking away the lives of Billy LaVaca, Judith Straub, Tim Hack, Kelly Drew, and Danny Law Glockner. All the victims were young adults close to the age of Duane and Patricia. Deeds extended further as he admitted to influencing a U.S. Army soldier, Danny Boy, to go AWOL, before ending his life too and burying him in a shallow grave. Although sentenced to be executed in March 2011 for his involvement in Danny Boy's demise, Edward Wayne Edwards passed away in prison merely a month later due to natural causes, evading the full extent of justice for his string of heinous crimes. The link between Edwards and the Duane-Patricia tragedy resided in his M.O. Edwards had a chilling tendency to target couples in lovers' lanes, the same location where Patricia and Duane met their untimely end. This disturbing similarity heightened suspicions surrounding Edwards and his potential involvement in the tragic fate of Patricia and Duane. Another suspect under investigation in the Duane-Patricia case was James Joseph Whitey Bulger, a well-known and infamous criminal within the vicinity. Bulger's criminal history dates back to 1951, marked by an arrest linked to a case of misconduct involving a similar assault as inflicted on Patricia. During the period when the tragic end of Patricia and Dwayne transpired, Bulger was documented to have been present in the area. However, despite his proximity to the crime scenes, no substantial evidence surfaced to conclusively implicate him in the incidents. As the passage of time dimmed any hope for fresh leads, the pursuit of the elusive perpetrator hit an impasse. However, in 2012, a glimmer of renewed hope emerged when Sergeant John Cadner, taking control as the head of detectives for the CCSO, was tasked with resurrecting this cold case. Sergeant Cadner knew the crucial importance of the DNA evidence extracted from a swab. 56 years ago, this key sample, originally sent to the State Crime Lab in 2001 by Detective Phil Madison during his tenure, only proved the DNA did not match Dwayne's genetic profile. Therefore, it was cataloged in CODI's Combined DNA Index System. The database, unfortunately, it failed to yield any promising matches, leaving the case to go cold again. Sergeant Cadner teamed up with Bode Technology to recreate the DNA sample when he got the case. By 2019, they had successfully made the sample again. This time, they did not just compare it with the samples in CODI's. They also checked it against DNA from regular people in open-source DNA databases. These databases are used by people who want to learn about their family history. Just a year before, in 2018, the Golden State offender was caught because some of his family members had given their DNA to a similar open-source DNA database. This helped identify and arrest him. The sample Sergeant Cadner uploaded matched 3 individuals. Investigators reached out to them and their families. They collected DNA samples and found that an individual named Kenneth Gould was the closest match to the foreign DNA obtained from Patricia swab. Sergeant Cadner expressed, "This was amazing, because after 65 years we finally had a lead and a location to explore. Everything was just theories before this. Now we had a solid lead and a name. It completely shifted the case's dynamics." Authorities encountered a new hurdle. Kenneth Gould had passed away in 2007, and authorities could not exhume his remains to get a DNA sample. Kenneth Gould was cremated in 2007. This presented a challenge. Yet they contacted Kenneth Gould's children, explaining the situation and the case. Surprisingly, the children agreed to provide their DNA for comparison. Initially unsure of their response, investigators were pleasantly surprised by their full cooperation. I was not certain how they would react when I approached them about their dad being a suspect in this case, but they were incredibly helpful. Upon comparing their DNA with the sample found at the crime scene, it turned out to be a match. Kenneth Gould hailed from Great Falls and was recognized for riding his horses around the Vineyard Road area where Patricia's remains were discovered. Intriguingly, he had resided close to Patricia's parents at one point, yet there was no apparent link between him and either Patricia or Dwayne. Notably, when Gould was 25 years old, he married a 16-year-old, the same age Patricia was at the time of the slayings. A month after Patricia and Dwayne's tragic end, Gould abruptly altered the course of his life. He uprooted his entire existence, relocating his family first to Tracy, then to Geraldine, and later to Hamilton, before eventually leaving the state of Montana entirely, settling in Missouri without any intention of returning. Kenneth Gould was deemed the most likely suspect in the slayings. His culpability could not be conclusively established without a proper trial. Sergeant Cadner conveyed his perspective, emphasizing that while they could not definitively prove Gould's guilt as he was no longer alive, the collective evidence strongly pointed toward him as the prime suspect. He highlighted that while they could not physically place the weapon in Gould's hand, considering all the gathered information and circumstances, there was a high level of certainty in his mind regarding Gould's involvement in the crime. Kenneth Gould's daughter mentioned to Sergeant Cadner that some individuals harbor hidden secrets, implying that her father might have had secrets unknown to anyone else. Following the identification of Kenneth Gould as the suspect, Wayne Bogle and Patricia Kalitsky were finally approached, offering them the closure they had sought for over 6 decades. While relieved to have closure and answers after such a prolonged period, the revelation also resurfaced painful memories for the families, especially for those who had personal connections with the couple. The families are experiencing a mix of emotions. It is a bittersweet moment. Dwayne and Patricia were vibrant and well-liked by many. Investigators invested deeply in this case, leaving a part of themselves in the pursuit of justice, which makes this closure heartfelt yet challenging. Patricia Kalitsky's sister, the sole surviving member of her family, had succumbed to advanced dementia by the time the identity of the perpetrator was revealed. The Bogle family had endured years of turmoil with speculations about Dwayne's fate, including unverified rumors linking him to the mob. Dwayne's niece, Karen Bogle McCarthy, who was 54 at the time of the revelation, reflected on the impact of modern technology on their generation. She acknowledged that while technological advancements had their merits, they also reignited deeply buried wounds that had started to heal. In an interview, Edgar Wilson, Kenneth Gould's neighbor for a decade in Missouri, expressed utter disbelief about the accusations against Gould. Wilson described Gould as mild-mannered, non-confrontational, and inherently good, portraying him as a genuinely good person who did not engage in vices like drinking or causing trouble. During his time in Missouri, Gould resided on a farm with his family, earning respect as an exceptional horse trainer. He also tended to sheep and goats at his farm. An unsubstantiated theory is that Kenneth Gould secretly loved Patricia, and when all of a sudden Patricia fell for Dwayne, and only after a month of dating they were thinking of marrying, is when Kenneth decided to take the matters into his own hands. He confronted the couple on the lover's lane, and when he saw the couple involved in intimacy in the car, it enraged Kenneth Gould, and he held the couple at gunpoint. He tied up Dwayne with his own belt and threatened him to leave Patricia. When Dwayne disagreed, he took his life right next to his car. He then kidnapped Patricia, took her 8 miles away into the wilderness, and had his way with her before taking her life as well. However, there are some irregularities in his theory. There was a big age difference between Kenneth and Patricia of almost 13 years. But many argued that Kenneth actually married his wife when she was the same age as Patricia, 16 years old, and he was 25 years old at his wedding. More so, this incident happened only 4 years after Kenneth's marriage. Did the words of Kenneth Gould's daughter that everyone has hidden secrets mean something more? Could it be the daughter knew about her father's infatuation with Patricia somehow? Or was it just a passing statement? The motive behind the crime remains unknown, as 3 individuals who could shed light on it have all passed away. Was it a brutal end to a love triangle? Or a moment of weakness where by and large a benign human being became an animal for a night? Was it the doing of a single perpetrator? Or were there more than one assailant? Those who could have answered these questions have passed away. Darlene Zetterauer, born to Wilma Joyce and Robert Charles Zetterauer of Savannah, Georgia, shared an unbreakable bond with Barbara Susan Schreiber, lovingly known as Barbie. Both girls, born just months apart in 1961, were the epitome of friendship. They both finished 8th grade at a Tux Middle School and were excited to start their much-awaited summer in Hollywood, Florida. On the fateful evening of June 18, 1975, the teenagers, Barbara and Darlene, left Barbara's Hollywood home, assuring Barbara's mother that they were headed to spend the night at their friend Valerie's house. The details of their movements that night are shrouded in conflicting reports. However, most accounts suggest they stopped by the home of a friend, Gail, a close friend of Darlene. It was a sunny June day in 1975 when Barbara Schreiber and Darlene Zetterauer, both 14 years old, strolled down the streets of their Hollywood neighborhood. They paused on a bench at the corner of Sterling Road and Northwest 40th Street. Gail, the last verified person to see the best friends alive, vividly recalls spotting them sitting together on a busy street bench in Hollywood, near the intersection of Route 441 and Hollywood Boulevard. Her memories of Darlene paint a picture of a lively, fun-loving girl with a unique way of pulling back her hair with her fingers. Like many other youngsters of their time, neither of the girls owned a car or knew how to drive. Lacking transportation of their own, they often relied on hitchhiking to reach their destinations. The trio enjoyed the carefree summer days before high school, where laughter filled the air. But on that fateful day, Gail recalls a white van suddenly pulling up near the bench. Gail witnessed both girls willingly getting into the white van. Once the door closed, their fate was sealed. Unlike Gail, Darlene and Barbara were bold and outgoing girls. Gail wanted to join them on their escapades, but she had a strict father who would not have approved of her entering a stranger's van. Gail ultimately decided to stay back. It was this keen parental guidance that ultimately saved Gail's life, as it was the last time Darlene and Barbara were seen alive. Barbara and Darlene vanished without a trace. The reason behind this appalling abduction became a haunting mystery. Then, on the morning of June 19, 1975, a family on a fishing trip stumbled upon the lifeless bodies of two teenage girls. It was Darlene and Barbara. They lay side by side along the canal, a shocking scene paralleling Highway 27, approximately 4 miles north of Andy Town, an outpost for truckers that has long faded into history. Investigators revealed a chilling truth. Both victims had suffered a fatal gunshot wound, likely from a large-caliber bullet, perhaps a .45, evident from the substantial amount of blood at the scene. Both the girls met their untimely demise where their bodies were found. Conflicting reports emerged regarding their state of clothes, with some suggesting they were fully clothed, while others hinted at the possibility of something even more sinister. They were both brutally forced before the fatal massacre. Following the discovery of the girls' bodies, Gail, the last person to have seen them alive, expressed her apprehension to the media. "I was scared for them," she recounted. "I did not understand what was happening. I am grateful that I did not follow them into that unknown situation. I think the person behind us was just a sick individual," Gail remarked solemnly. The overwhelming uncertainty surrounding the events leading to the tragic end of Barbara and Darlene cast a shadow over the community. The initial investigation led the detectives to Valerie, the supposed host of the planned sleepover, which revealed a stark truth. The teens had never arranged to spend the night. It was a ploy often used by Barbara and Darlene when they sought to venture out without their parents' knowledge. According to investigators from Broward County, witness interviews suggested the girls might have been attempting to hitch a ride north, possibly in pursuit of illicit substances. Despite the immense community and media support drawn by the innocence and youth of the victims, the lack of modern technology posed insurmountable barriers for investigators in capturing the elusive perpetrator. There were no leads, no technology to trace their steps, making it an immensely challenging case from the start. The case went cold. Broward County Sheriff Detective Andrew Giannino bore the weight of the cold case for decades. A relentless pursuit of justice that consumed dozens of detectives, deputies, crime scene investigators, and forensic specialists from the Broward Sheriff's Office. Their unwavering dedication to unveil the truth behind the cold case eventually reaped fruit decades later. In early 2023, the Broward Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit took charge. They were met with stacks of reports, numerous crime scene photos, boxes of evidence, and the clothing worn by Barbara and Darlene. Detective Roberto Casares from the BSO Crime Scene Unit meticulously examined Darlene's clothing, isolating DNA trapped within the garment fibers. This meticulous process finally yielded what the detectives had been waiting for nearly 50 years. The cold case unit managed to extract a complete DNA profile of the suspect. After nearly half a century of fruitless actions. Equipped with this breakthrough, investigators conducted extensive searches through databases, finally yielding a match. The cold case unit made a definitive link, identifying a man named Robert Clark Keebler as the primary suspect in the case, established through his biological artifacts. The revelation offered a beacon of progress after years of tormenting uncertainty, moving closer toward justice for Barbara and Darlene. The exploration into Robert Clark Keebler's history uncovered a troubling record of armed robbery, forced intercourse, and aggravated assault spanning from California to South Florida. Authorities confirmed Keebler passed away in 2019 in South Florida, closing the door on the chance for direct accountability. Yet the pursuit of answers for the victims' families persisted. Detective Janina's investigation led him to believe that Robert Clark Keebler drove Barbara and Darlene to the isolated Everglades, where he subjected them to horrific assault. Before shooting them, before the DNA testing, there had been no evidence linking him to the case. As the case concluded with a sense of closure, a new chapter of inquiry unfolds. Investigators now scrutinize the possibility of Keebler's involvement in the flat tire slaying unsolved cases in South Florida. The quest for DNA evidence linking these crimes with Barbara and Darlene's tragedy persists as detectives tirelessly sift through the past for clues. Barbara and Darlene were denied the chance to embrace life's fullness and remain mourned by their families and those who cherished them. Their stories serve as a poignant reminder of lives cut short, their potential forever unrealized. A tragedy etched into the annals of history, yearning for answers and justice that may yet be found in the collective remembrance and contributions of the community. A person turned an ordinary diner into a sanctuary of warmth and friendship. But then the bonds forged in such a place were suddenly ripped apart. A beloved community figure is tragically taken away. For nearly 24 years, this tragic demise remained a mystery. Stephen Davis was a 46-year-old man who stayed in Pensacola, Florida. He was a cab driver for Yellow Cab Taxi. His regular presence at the local Waffle House was as reliable as the sunrise, and his easygoing demeanor made him a natural at forming connections with patrons and staff alike. The Waffle House had become more than just a diner for Stephen. It was a home away from home, where he forged bonds that extended beyond the clinking of silverware and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. On August 26, 1998, an ominous cloud settled over the once inviting Waffle House as news spread of the tragic events that had befallen Stephen Davis. In the quiet pre-dawn hours, Stephen found himself embroiled in a terrifying encounter that would forever alter the course of his life. As he approached his cab, parked in the shadows of the early morning, he was unaware of the menace lurking within the vehicle. A man, concealed in the darkness, lay in wait for Stephen, setting the stage for a horrific ambush. Sensing imminent danger, desperately attempted to flee from the assailant. As he bolted from the car, the attacker opened fire, and a hail of bullets pierced the stillness of the Pensacola night. Despite his frantic efforts to escape, Stephen was struck multiple times, once in the jaw and twice in his right posterior thorax, and his life hung in the balance. With every ounce of strength he could muster, Stephen staggered towards the nearby Winn-Dixie and refuge from his assailant. Tragically, he collapsed in the parking lot, his life ebbing away as the gravity of his injuries took their toll. The glow of the streetlights illuminated the gruesome scene as Stephen succumbed to his wounds. In the aftermath of the horrific attack, Stephen's car was discovered near Navy Boulevard, its driver's door and rear passenger doors left ominously ajar. The shattered driver's side window bore testament to the violence that had unfolded, offering a chilling glimpse into the chaos that had transpired. An immediate investigation was launched, with law enforcement officials working tirelessly to uncover any leads that could shed light on the identity of the perpetrator. Yet, as the case progressed, it became increasingly clear that the lack of witnesses and physical evidence presented a formidable challenge. Despite countless efforts and the occasional tip, the passage of time seemed only to deepen the enigma of Stephen's case. The unwavering determination of investigators to bring justice to Stephen Davis and his loved ones culminated in a significant breakthrough nearly a quarter of a century after his tragic demise. In 2022, the investigation into Stephen's case was reopened, and through the utilization a bloody fingerprint from the scene was meticulously examined. This led investigators to identify Donald Holmes as the prime suspect. At the time of this discovery, Holmes was already serving a 20-year sentence in a Florida state prison for a home invasion robbery that occurred in Escambia County in 2012. Initially set for release in 2032, Holmes now faces new charges for the slaying of Stephen Davis. This will ensure that he will be held accountable for the heinous crime. The announcement made by the Escambia County Sheriff's Office on March 5, 2024, brought a long-awaited sense of closure to Stephen's family and friends. The relentless pursuit of justice, coupled with the remarkable advancements in forensic science, enabled detectives to finally connect the fingerprint to Holmes, ultimately solving the mystery that had haunted the community. For over 24 years, Stephen's sisters, Ruby Kastner and Julie MacArthur, said that he was known for being very friendly and helpful to anyone. Ruby said he was a big bear. He was there for everybody. He got a lot of people off illegal substances. As the legal proceedings against Donald Holmes ensue, the memory of Stephen Davis lives on. In a turn of events that has stunned both Los Angeles and Northern California, a cold case from 1984 has suddenly reignited public interest. Found beaten and lifeless in a Roseville alley, Madeline Garcia's case went cold for decades, leaving unanswered questions that have finally found answers decades later. Madeline Garcia, born in Chico, California to Spanish immigrant parents, lived a life rich in cultural heritage and community spirit. Growing up in Rockland and East Sacramento, California, she was cherished for her warmth and generosity. After marrying Frank Garcia, she made a home in East Sacramento, where she was known for her exceptional cooking, vibrant gardens, and creative crafts. In the late 1970s, Madeline moved to South Placer, continuing her commitment to her community. She lived a quiet life, but at the age of 69, that life would be tragically cut short. On the morning of September 26, 1984, Madeline Garcia was found in an alleyway on the 300 block of Atlantic Street. Madeline, known for her early morning walks on her distinctive tricycle, had been collecting cans when she was attacked. A witness discovered her body partially concealed behind the West House Hotel and Saloon. The scene was one of unspeakable violence. She had been beaten with the ferocity of the assault so intense that her dentures were thrown from the scene. The police who arrived on the scene were confronted with a grim discovery, as her body also bore signs of an assault. In the wake of Madeline's tragic demise, the Roseville Police Department launched an exhaustive investigation into her vicious slaying. Detectives canvassed the area, interviewing residents, and tracking down any potential leads. Detective James Fujitani and evidence technician Gary DeMille, one Dory, worked diligently at the crime scene, but progress was slow. The investigation was briefly redirected when a double slaying surfaced. And although Fujitani managed to secure convictions in those cases, Madeline's case remained unresolved. Years passed, and as the case grew colder, new detectives like Kurt Leatherman and Mary Green picked up the case. Leatherman, in particular, made significant strides by aligning the evidence with advancements in forensic technology and clearing numerous suspects. But even with these renewed efforts, Madeline's case remained unsolved, and the hope for resolution seemed increasingly distant. The breakthrough came decades later with advancements in DNA technology and investigative techniques. In 2024, investigators employed familial DNA testing. This technique revealed a match linking Richard Moore, a man with a history of arson near the crime scene, to the unsolved case. This new development prompted a renewed push to locate Moore, who had since relocated to Los Angeles. As the case was reactivated, the technology and persistence of investigators led to Moore's arrest on June 27, 2024. Moore was transported back to Placer County, where he faced charges involving the slaying of Madeline Garcia, as well as kidnapping and assault. Neighbors who lived by Moore in a quiet Echo Park neighborhood said they were in disbelief over the allegations, with many saying the man seemed friendly and helpful. One neighbor said, "It has been a shock to learn that something so crazy is happening with someone who we live near to. He was always pretty friendly. I rode my bicycle by one time and he asked if I needed to air my tires." Moore's initial court appearance on July 8, 2024, was the beginning of the judicial process. Moore, who entered a not guilty plea, was appointed a public defender as the case proceeded through the legal system. His arraignment set the stage for a trial that would test the strength of the evidence and the effectiveness of the new forensic methods used to crack the case. As the legal proceedings continues, Madeline's family and the Roseville community waits for a resolution. Terry Middlekopf, Madeline's oldest granddaughter, said Moore's arrest was bittersweet. She said, "It is a bittersweet moment. I can only hope to my grandkids remember me the way that I remember her." The arrest not only brought renewed attention to Madeline's case, but also provided a glimmer of closure after decades of uncertainty and grief. Dennis Leroy Wood, a 71-year-old man known for his gentle nature and love for solitude, lived peacefully in Moorpark, California. His days were spent in tranquility, a simple routine that provided comfort in his later years. But on April 16, 2004, Dennis' world was turned upside down in a way no one could have predicted. Dennis Leroy Wood's day that began as a seemingly ordinary day would soon spiral into a nightmarish event that no one could have predicted. But then deputies with the Ventura County Sheriff's Office were dispatched to his home on the 12500 block of Mountain Trail Street. The visit was part of a routine wellness check prompted by concerns from neighbors who had not seen or heard from Dennis in several days. The deputies approached the home, unaware that they were about to uncover a grim scene. As the deputies arrived at the property, there was an unsettling silence surrounding the house. The once cozy and peaceful home seemed eerily quiet, with no signs of life. After receiving no response to their knocks, the deputies decided to enter the residence. What they found inside was far more horrifying than they had anticipated. The lifeless body of Dennis lay in the home, who had always kept to himself, was found deceased from at least one gunshot wound. The discovery marked the beginning of a complex investigation. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office quickly ruled Dennis' demise as a slaying. Who could have committed such a heinous act against someone as harmless as Dennis? There were no immediate signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to be stolen from the home, deepening the mystery surrounding Dennis' demise. Was this a random act of violence, or was there something more sinister at play? The investigation revealed disturbing details about the final moments of his life. It was determined that he had lost his life due to multiple gunshot wounds, with injuries to both his head and chest. Even more unsettling was the fact that Dennis' body had gone undiscovered for nearly 2 weeks. During that time, his home, once a haven of peace, had become the silent witness to a horrifying crime. Detectives interviewed neighbors, friends, and anyone who might have had contact with Dennis in the days leading up to the slaying. They pursued every lead, hoping to uncover something that would point them in the direction of the perpetrator. But despite their efforts, the case remained a mystery. The detectives quickly realized that the case was more complex than they initially thought. There were no clear signs of a break-in, and nothing of significant value appeared to be missing from the home. The absence of an obvious motive made it difficult for investigators to identify a suspect. With no clear direction, the case began to stall. Over the years, the case of Dennis remained a haunting, unsolved mystery for the Ventura County Sheriff's Office. Investigators would occasionally reevaluate the case, hoping that advancements in forensic might shed new light on the crime. Despite their efforts, the case remained cold, with no significant breakthroughs. However, that all changed on May 14, 2024, when the sheriff's office made a stunning announcement. They had uncovered new evidence that allegedly linked a man named Nami to the slaying of Dennis. After 20 years of uncertainty, there was finally a glimmer of hope that justice would be served. Authorities were tight-lipped about the specifics of the new evidence, citing the ongoing investigation and legal proceedings. The details of how Nami was connected to the crime and the nature of the evidence remained undisclosed. This left many to speculate about what had led to this unexpected breakthrough. One thing was clear: the case had taken a significant turn. On the morning of May 14, 2024, Nami was arrested around 11 a.m. by Ventura County deputies. Nami was quickly transferred to the Ventura County Jail, where he now awaits charges for first-degree slaying. With bail set at $2 million, Nami remained in custody as the legal process began to unfold. The arrest of Nami brought a measure of closure to the 20-year-old cold case. For the family and friends of Dennis Leroy Wood, the news was bittersweet. A mix of relief that someone had finally been held accountable, and sorrow for the years of pain and uncertainty they had endured. In July 1977, the remains of an unidentified individual were discovered in Yakima, Washington. An employee from a hardware store contacted police after noticing a distinct odor coming from a parked van in a parking lot near the hardware store. Officers with the Yakima Police Department responded to the scene, where they found the remains of an individual hidden inside of an abandoned vehicle. 2 days later, an autopsy was performed. The autopsy determined that the remains were that of a young female. She was approximately 18 to 25 years old. She was around 5 feet 8 inches tall and estimated to be 130 pounds. The autopsy concluded that she had sustained several injuries, The woman's cause of demise was determined to be strangulation, and her manner of demise was slaying. She had been hit on the head 3 times with a heavy object, mutilated and left face down on her hands and knees in the back of the van. She wore only light-colored socks. A green sweater had been placed over the upper part of her body. Other clothing that was found near the woman's body included a yellow handmade dress, white underwear stenciled with Scott Lily IIH, blue corduroy Farah, brand jeans, and a blue shirt. Attempts to identify the woman through dental and FBI fingerprint records were unsuccessful. Dental records were created from the remains and compared to several missing women from jurisdictions around the country. Unfortunately, there were no matches. Numerous individuals were interviewed. Several tips regarding the woman's identity were received from all over the country. However, no leads materialized into an identification for the woman or her perpetrator. The woman, who became known as Yakima Jane Doe, was buried in a Washington cemetery. In 2004, with advancements in forensic science, further attempts to identify the woman were made. At the request of the Yakima Police Department, the Yakima County Coroner's Office exhumed the remains of the unidentified woman. The remains were provided to the King County Medical Examiner's Office for further forensic evaluation. The remains were then submitted to the University of North Texas for the development of an STR profile. The STR profile was uploaded into CODIS in 2005. No matches were found. The identity of Yakima Jane Doe remained a mystery, despite the extensive efforts of law enforcement. In April 2016, details of the case were entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. In 2022, the Yakima Police Department submitted forensic evidence to Othram. They were hoping that advanced DNA testing could assist in the identification of Yakima Jane Doe. Othram scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive genealogical profile for the slain woman. Othram's in-house forensic genetic genealogy team then used this profile to conduct extensive genetic genealogy research. This provided new investigative leads to law enforcement. A follow-up investigation was conducted using these new leads. Investigators identified potential relatives of the woman after many interviews and conversations. A reference DNA sample was collected from a potential relative and compared to the DNA profile of the woman. This comparison confirmed the identity of Yakima Jane Doe as Verita Joni Gates, born on October 21, 1952. If alive today, Joni would be 71 years old. Joni was described by her family as a wanderer. She was known to hitchhike between Vermont and New York, where she was from, as well as to the West Coast. In early July 1977, less than 2 weeks before her remains were discovered in Yakima, Joni was known to be in a hospital near Chicago. Joni's family spent decades searching for her, not knowing until now what happened to her. Immediate family surviving Joni are her sister, Mary Lee, and her 2 brothers, Jeffrey and David. The identification of their sister has brought closure to their family after a 45-year search for her and for a wound that never healed. Her siblings wish to thank everybody involved for all their hard work in identifying. Joni Joseph Cannizzaro, a well-known entrepreneur in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, seemed to have it all: a successful career, thriving businesses, and a loving family. But on January 18, 2013, his promising future was shattered when 2 armed men invaded his home, leading to a crime that would send shockwaves through Lansdale. For years, the mystery surrounding his case lingered until a breakthrough brought long-awaited answers. This is a tale of ambition, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of justice for a life taken too soon. Joseph Cannizzaro's roots were deeply embedded in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, where he spent much of his early life. From a young age, he was known for his industrious nature, working tirelessly to carve out a successful career within his community. Joseph's drive and determination made him a familiar face in Lansdale, especially as he became involved in various local businesses. His entrepreneurial spirit shone through when he co-owned Finn McCool's Tavern in Ambler, Pennsylvania, a lively establishment that quickly became a community staple. This venture was just the beginning of Joseph's expanding business interests, as he soon ventured into contracting, establishing multiple companies that solidified his reputation as a savvy businessman. With success came growth, and Joseph was not one to shy away from new opportunities. He began acquiring properties, taking on mortgages to broaden his portfolio and secure his financial future. One of these acquisitions was a Lansdale auto garage, adding yet another asset to his growing collection. His ventures made him a well-known figure, recognized not only for his business acumen, but also for his dedication to the local community. Despite his many responsibilities, Joseph managed to create a life of relative comfort. He balanced his numerous ventures with the demands of property ownership and business management. However, beneath the surface, the pressures of his expanding empire began to mount. As Joseph's career flourished, so did the demands on his time and energy. The weight of managing multiple businesses and properties brought increased stress. Yet Joseph remained a resilient and determined individual. However, Joseph's life took a sudden and tragic turn on January 18, 2013. That morning, just after 10 a.m., the police received a chilling 911 call from a residence on the 300 block of Swartley Road in Hilltown Township. The call, though brief, sent alarm bells ringing for the dispatchers. Despite their efforts, the connection was lost before they could gather more information, leaving an uneasy silence on the other end. Within minutes, another call came in, this time from a nearby house. A woman, her voice filled with terror, explained that she was calling from her neighbor's home. She relayed a horrifying story to the dispatchers. 2 armed men had broken into her home, taken her family hostage, and abducted her fiancé, who was later identified as Joseph Cannizzaro. She also reported that the intruders had stolen his pickup truck and other valuables from the property. The urgency of the situation spurred police into immediate action. They raced to the scene, fearing the worst, but hoping to prevent further violence. Upon arrival, officers began to search the premises for any sign of Joseph or the assailants. Their search led them to the garage, where they made a grim discovery. There they found Joseph's lifeless body, his hands cruelly bound with zip ties. The scene was one of unimaginable violence. The marks of a brutal struggle were evident. The officers knew that this was no ordinary robbery. It was a calculated and cold-blooded act of slaying. As investigators combed through the evidence, the details of Joseph's final moments began to emerge. An autopsy later confirmed the fears of the officers on the scene. Joseph had passed away, due to multiple stab wounds. His demise was officially ruled a slaying, but the investigation had only just begun. The search for the perpetrators and the motive behind such a heinous act became the focus of law enforcement, who worked tirelessly to piece together the events that led to this tragedy. The once vibrant and successful entrepreneur, who had built a life of hard work and dedication, had met a violent and untimely end. Detectives quickly interviewed Joseph Cannizzaro's fiancée, who recounted the terrifying events of that morning. She explained how 2 gunmen broke into their home and confronted her and Joseph in their bedroom, tying their hands and legs with zip ties. After Joseph's 12-year-old son entered the bedroom, one of the men put a knife to his throat and bound him with zip ties as well. His eldest son was at school while this happened. One intruder led Joseph through the house, while the other stayed with her and Joseph's young son. The situation turned even more horrifying when the second gunman took her into another room and assaulted her. The men stole jewelry, guns, and money. After the men left, she managed to free herself and the boy, escaping to a neighbor's house to call 911. As the investigation unfolded, crucial evidence emerged. In the years before his slaying, Joseph had incurred millions in debt, including money owed to various casinos. He claimed bankruptcy on $10 million in debt and later settled 2 federal lawsuits involving passing bad checks. Surveillance footage from that day showed the suspects unloading items from Joseph's stolen pickup truck behind a Friendly's restaurant in Quakertown. Later, officers found the abandoned truck with a pair of gardening gloves nearby, which were sent to the FBI for analysis. The gloves revealed DNA from an unknown male matching the DNA profile obtained from the assault examination of Joseph's fiancée. Investigators also discovered 11 cell phones in the victim's home, of which 8 were usable. The detectives also found a black face mask in the stolen truck. A DNA analysis in 2020 linked the mask to Thomas Delgado, whose phone records showed multiple contacts with Joseph in 2011. This was 2 years before the home invasion. However, Joseph's fiancée stated she did not know Delgado, nor did anyone in their home own a mask like the one found. Delgado was arrested and charged with nearly 36 offenses, including slaying, assault, and kidnapping. With bail denied, Delgado remains in custody as investigators continue to piece together the full story behind this tragic crime. The arrest of Thomas Delgado brought a significant breakthrough in the case of Joseph Cannizzaro, offering a glimmer of justice for a community and family deeply affected by his tragic demise. While the scars of that brutal day will remain, the pursuit of justice continues as Delgado faces numerous charges. While Delgado is in custody, police continues to search for the second suspect. If you have any information on the case of Joseph Cannizzaro, please call Bucks County detectives at 215-348-6354 or Hilltown Township Police at 215-453-6011.